Yes. Okay, great. So top of the morning to you all. Happy St. Patrick's Day. My name is Heather Disque, and I am the Forest Pest Entomologist for Forest Pest Management, and we're part of the Maryland Department of Agriculture. So I am also our Eastern Shore entomologist, and so my office is here in Easton. So today we're going to do a very quick overview of a lot of the forest pests that you might see in your forests. And so this here is actually Wye Island. And so one of the things we are doing out on Wye Island that's kind of unique is you can see these here are hemlock branches. And so we do treat some hemlock trees, which is kind of exciting. So let's get right into it. So first off is gypsy moth. So many of you are probably familiar with the gypsy moth. In Queen Anne's County, it hasn't been a big problem. In the last several years, there's been some pockets. Certainly, we still do survey for gypsy moth every year. We have a cooperative agreement with many of the counties, excluding on the shore, Caroline, and Queen Anne's, and Kent. They do participate in our program. So we do not survey private properties in those counties. We do survey private properties in all the remaining counties on the shore and most of the counties on the western shore. So what we're looking for are these egg masses here. So these are going to be laid in late July through August. And then, so we're surveying August, September, and then through the fall and winter. So this is what a female gypsy moth looks like, and male. These are kind of big moths. You would definitely notice them. The female is flightless. This is what first instar caterpillars look like. These caterpillars have several instars. They start to get bigger, and then once they get to their full size with the caterpillar, they'll look like this. They have several blue dots, and then several red. These will look different from your forest tent caterpillars and your eastern tent caterpillars, mostly because they do not have tents. They don't have those big poofy things that you often see in cherry trees. And also, those caterpillars don't have this color difference on their back. So this is what the pupal stage looks like. So, they go from caterpillars. The caterpillars are really the most damaging. You can see here, even these small caterpillars have eaten sort of large holes in oak trees. These do prefer oaks, although they can survive, and you'll often see egg masses on pines. They mostly prefer white oaks, mainly because white oaks have that kind of bark that is not so smooth. There's cracks and crevices, and the gypsy moth like that because they can hide their egg masses in those cracks and crevices, which helps keep them away from predators as well as from the environment. So you would think, hey, there's a woodland in December. No, this is June. So this is what gypsy moth can do. So it can totally defoliate trees when they get into high levels. Some of the So how long has this been a problem? So 1980 was about the first time that we started seeing gypsy moth in Maryland. And these bars show here where we mapped the defoliation acres. This is number of acres that were defoliated in red. And then the amount of acres that we sprayed are in blue for gypsy moth. So you can kind of see this like rolling pattern here. And so we're kind of in this lull here. So we're waiting for that uptick again. And so gypsy moth is cyclical. You might not have a problem with it for several years, and then all of a sudden it's going to spike up. And a lot of that is because of environmental factors. So what is it looking like for this year? So right now, this is Eastern Shore here. You look at it, we had 6.6% of the blocks that we surveyed this year were positive for gypsy moth. And last year we had 6.7%. So we're kind of static this year. So the same areas, basically the same areas that were positive last year are positive again this year in the same levels. And so for us, that's kind of good because we aren't seeing that much defoliation right now on the eastern shore. So we'll take it. You can see this is central region. They're seeing low levels, about 2% of their blocks positive, 1% in the northeastern region. Southern region this year saw no gypsy moths, which is pretty impressive since last year there was 10% of the blocks were positive. And then you can see out west on the western side of Maryland, they're seeing a pretty big increase in gypsy moth this year. We do. So with gypsy moth being cyclical, a lot of times if you you'll start to see the Poconos region of Pennsylvania will start to become positive, and the western Maryland will start to become positive, and then basically the whole state of Maryland starts to become positive. It's just, for some reason, that's the way it rolls. So what do we do for gypsy moths? So you saw in the defoliation graph, we do suppression. So this is a lot of what we do. So we use helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft to spray for gypsy moth. What we are spraying is BT, so it's not a chemical, it's a biological. It's something that we spray on the oak trees as they're beginning to leaf out. And so then the caterpillars are already out and they're young and they will have made some holes in the leaves, but they won't have created a lot of damage. And we need them to be feeding because the BT needs to be consumed by the insect so that it can get into its intestinal tract and basically blow it up from the inside out. So, so it is a soil bacteria, BT. Some master gardeners already know about BT. It's used, you can buy it in little pumps and stuff. But we spray it obviously in larger quantities. So this is in the spring. So mainly we're looking when the leaves have leafed out by 25%, and then those gypsy moth caterpillars are in that first picture I showed where they're that really small, you're not quite noticing those color patterns yet. We're trying to get those caterpillars early. So usually it's usually you start seeing forsythia bloom is when these caterpillars are active. So it's doing nothing to the bird population. BT is specifically targeted for gypsy moth. So it's just going to kill caterpillars who are feeding on those leaves at that time, and it's only active for 2 weeks. So yes, it's not going to wipe out everything. No. Yes, it is. Certainly there are native insects that would eat it, but it does have, if you can kind of remember, I'm not sure how many slides back, otherwise I'd back it up for you. Those caterpillars have those long hairs on them, and so those are really irritating to birds. And so they're not really going to go after them in large quantities because they're going to get irritated. But yeah, I've seen praying mantises eating egg casings. It's usually the egg stage that we have a lot of good native predators for. And so I've seen, and then there's another thing that says when the squirrels and other woodland creatures get a lot of acorns, you'll see gypsy moth populations kind of soar the next year because they got a lot of food and they aren't looking for those egg masses to consume. And so high acorn years can also mean following high gypsy moth years. Problems pollination barrier ban. So a lot of people kind of remember these from the 80s. They're the sticky bands. One of the things that gypsy moth does is move up and down the tree really frequently, and so this kind of prevents them from going forward. In addition, you can do burlaps around your tree if you don't like sticky bands. And one of the things is that it's kind of mimicking that white oak crackly bark, and so it's a big females find really nice areas to lay their egg masses under. And so that way you can get some control by either, number one, they're going to lay on the burlap, so you can just take them right off, or they're going to lay them under the burlap, but at an area where you can reach, where you'd be able to scrape them off. So that's also helpful. And then one of the main things that we at Forest Pest always look out for is the gypsy moth fungus. This is Entomophaga mymiga. And so this is a fungus that was released when the gypsy moth first came here. So the gypsy moth was first brought here to be used for the silk trade, and then it escaped and got into the environment. And so they started releasing this fungus that they had identified, and it didn't really take off. And so nobody really thought that it was going to be much help. And then all of a sudden in the 80s, we started finding it more and more and more, until now we basically see this fungus throughout the gypsy moth range. And so one of the things that the fungus does is that it is in the soil, and it's it's dormant over the winter. Once the spring comes, it breaks its dormancy, and it'll start infecting smaller caterpillars. And then these smaller caterpillars will die, the fungus will keep growing, then it will start to reproduce, and then it's basically like, they like to call it the death cloud of fungus. And so these spores will kind of explode out of the cadavers, and then they'll be floating around in the environment looking for more gypsy moth to infect. And so since the gypsy moth move up and down the trees, they're going to be in contact with the soil where it is in the winter, and they're going to infect themselves with this fungus. And so the fungus it does kill a lot of caterpillars. It mostly kills them when the caterpillar population is low. So when the caterpillar population gets too high, when there's too many of them, the fungus can't kind of compete with that. It can't reproduce itself so much that it can kill all of those caterpillars, which is where this virus comes in. So of this NPV virus, it kind of does the same thing, but it really only kills caterpillars when they're larger, so the defoliation has already happened, but it will kill gypsy moth in high levels. And usually we don't see the virus unless the gypsy moth caterpillar population has got really high. And so when you're looking at trees like this one, you can see here there are several caterpillars that have died here. And so you'll see there's some in V's, there's some in straight lines, and this is typically what happens is that the caterpillars, they think they're okay, and they're coming down the tree, and they start to move up the tree, and then they just lose it. And so with fungus-killed caterpillars, they'll be in this nice straight line, and they'll be really dried up, and then they kind of just hang there. And then the same thing with the virus-killed caterpillars. They're also kind of just hanging there, but if you can see, this one is in a V shape, an upside down V. So that's one of the main things that we look for is we look for dead caterpillars on trees, but then how did they die? Are they squishy and in a V shape, which means the virus killed them, or are they straight up and down, kind of desiccated? That would be the fungal pathogen. And so if you see dead caterpillars out there, you can kind of do your own investigation. And it's kind of easy, V for virus. And so that's one of our things that's out in the environment and that we can typically count on for low levels of gypsy moth to be out there, to be killing caterpillars, to kind of do some of the suppression work for us. So moving on to ash borer. I won't go into a lot of detail for treatment options on this one because you're going to have Colleen coming up in a little bit. So emerald ash borer is also a non-native pest from Asia. You can see this is what the adult looks like, beautiful, green, shiny, and this is what their exit holes look like. So when they're coming out of the tree, there's these nice V-shaped holes. We do have some native native insects, but also, well, you'll see holes coming out of ash trees, but they're usually more circular, so that's usually a clearwing borer. So if you see a more circular hole, you'll know that that's a native insect, whereas the invasive here, V-shaped hole. So this is what emerald ash borer tunnels look like. They're these nice S-shaped galleries. Typically, this is, emerald ash borer has been here a while. You can see here's the first instar, and then it's moving into the second instar, and then we're getting into these larger holes, and then that's when you really start to see some damage. So what does it look like when you haven't stripped off the tree? So usually emerald ash borer trees have these epicormic sprouts. It might not be this dramatic, where it's dead on top and only on the bottom, but a lot of times you'll start to see the sprouting. That's mainly because you saw all those S tunnels going through the bark. It's starting to cut off the water transport system. And so the tree realizes that it's losing some of those things going up, so it's trying to create more branches on the bottom. You'll see bark splitting here. And then a lot of times what happens is woodpeckers, they are one of our best indicators of if emerald ash borer is around, because they go straight into the wood and they start picking off larvae because they're big and awesome. And so you'll start to see they'll woodpeckers will start coming in and stripping off the bark. A lot of times what we're doing this time of year is looking for these trees, looking for trees that have woodpecker damage on them, because it's easy to see before the leaves start coming in. So those are some of the things we start to look for, identify an infestation. So some of the things that we're doing for forest pests, I'm sure many of you are aware that the Western Shore has been quarantined for years. So in 2015, we found a trap in Canaan, Talbot, and Dorchester, all positive for emerald ash borer. So that is when the entire state became quarantined for emerald ash borer in 2015. So what we're doing is we're trying to find out where the beetle is progressing, and we're also setting up traps in areas that we're releasing parasitoids. And I'll talk about the parasitoids in a minute. You can see, it's not that surprising that Garrett is positive as well as Baltimore because they've been quarantined for a long time. But this year we did find a trap in Cecil County that's positive. So that was the first time for Cecil County. And then although these were negative for emerald ash borer, we did find about right here, we found several trees that had about a 5-year infestation of emerald ash borer. So that was from a homeowner call. And so I'm going to get to just let me finish this roll. So that homeowner call that had a 5-year infestation, at least of emerald ash borer, the trees were very advanced. And so Kent County and Cecil County are now positive for emerald ash borer. And so now we're just looking at Caroline, Wicomico, Somerset, and Worcester that have not reported emerald ash borer in those counties yet. Quarantine, so there's a national quarantine for emerald ash borer. So the state of Maryland is now part of that national quarantine. We have been for a while. But quarantine on the Eastern Shore, what that means is that any ash products that you have just basically can move anywhere in the state now. They can move anywhere in between any state that's also quarantined for emerald ash borer. So ash products are firewood, chips that are bigger than 1 inch in any dimension, ash logs, that kind of thing. Those are all supposed to stay within the quarantined area. But the quarantined area is so large now. Basically, it encompasses every state from New York through the Carolinas at this point. It's a pretty big area. So you have to keep those ash products in these areas. And what we recommend is you not move ash products within 50 miles of your original infestation. Because, this area has been positive for emerald ash borer. But obviously, we haven't been on the Eastern Shore. And so, while people can move stuff from the Western Shore to the Eastern Shore now that it's all quarantined, we usually don't recommend that because you're going to bring something from a higher level of infestation to a lower level of infestation. And that's going to upper shore to the lower shore, same thing. So basically, it used to be really restrictive, but now basically you can do whatever with it as long as you keep it within like a 12-state area. With the exception of Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania has now put in an exterior quarantine for firewood. So you cannot bring any wood products from Maryland into Pennsylvania is basically what that means, without a permit and without proving you've heat treated the wood. So if you want to go through that, go for it. But most of the time, it's basically Pennsylvania is trying to keep those products out. So does that answer the question? Okay. All right. So what can you do for Emerald-Ash-Borer? So basically, any ash tree that you have on the eastern shore, if you want to keep it, you need to treat it. And so these are not what we do, but I couldn't get my pictures into here, so you're going to have to suffer with the stock pictures. So we can do drenches, and you can do injections into trees. Colleen's going to talk about it, but mainly it has to be done by a licensed pesticide applicator at this point. We did have one product that did have some good use, but it's unfortunately now just pesticide applicators can. It used to be both homeowner and licensed pesticide applicators could apply it, but now it's just licensed pesticide applicators, and that change has happened this year. So in a lot of your booklets, you'll see imidacloprid as listed as a homeowner applied product, but unless you have a license, you cannot apply that product anymore. So just as an FYI, but I'll let Colleen go through all that. So we FPM are licensed pesticide applicators, so we assist the DNR and the Conservation Corps with their treatments every year. This is like their program, but we're just there to make sure treatments are done the right way, which of course they are. They're awesome, but here's where we assisted with treated trees this year. DNR treated a couple of other areas that we weren't involved in, and but these are the ones that we were involved with this year. Yes, you do need to treat them because within 15 miles of known positive is where you probably have Emerald-Ash-Borer, but you're just not seeing the signs of it yet. And so it's really good to catch it early because as Colleen will tell you, if you catch it late, you're over. Game's over. You have to keep that tree, support the transport system moving. And so if you already have lost 30% of your canopy, the tree's done. Yeah, I'm sure Howard County, I'm sure they are. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, and then one of the other options is we as the state agency can release parasitoids. So we release an egg parasitoid and 2 larval parasitoids. You can see these have nice it's small. It's really pretty. But what we're doing is these attack either the larval stage or the egg stage of Emerald-Ash-Borer. We release them in forest environments. A lot of times what we're releasing are pupal stage. So they're in this log, they'll come out, they'll go to other trees trying to find places to lay their eggs. And so they'll lay their eggs in other trees. I'm running low on time already. So there's some pros and cons to these. Basically, the story is that I think these will be really useful once the initial wave of Emerald-Ash-Borer has happened. So these can't really save our big trees. These can mostly save smaller caliber trees. And so once Emerald-Ash-Borer comes through, kind of wipes out its population, kind of wipes out the trees. Unfortunately, hopefully these will be there in the background to then save any trees that are going to start resprouting. So this is kind of a long-term solution. They are not native. They are native to China. There's another one to Russia, but Emerald-Ash-Borer, the problem is that they've done tons of trials, and the trials show that none of our native parasitoids can do the work that these can, unfortunately. So these have been tested for many years. They have been approved for release because they are so specific to Emerald-Ash-Borer and to that Agrylus species. So they're not going to attack a lot of our natives. They're just going for emerald ash borer, so if emerald ash borer is not in the area, you can't release them because they're not going to do anything, because they're not going to attack any of our natives. So this is where we released this year, Garrett, Baltimore, Harper, Caroline County. This is a part of an IPM project that we're doing with the DNR and with the University of Maryland Entomology Department. So details are still forthcoming, but that's we're looking to see how insecticide and parasitoid releases affect ash health. It's not heavily. Yeah, so it's not heavily infested. We do feel like it is infested. We have seen it's within that 15-mile range. Easton is positive for emerald ash borers within that range, so we can release there. We just haven't caught a beetle. Like the big thing is you can see signs of it all day long. Like I could show you pictures of Disque exit holes at this location, but it doesn't matter until I hold that beetle in my hand and get it to an identifier. It's not, Caroline's not heavily infested. I think it is lightly infested though. The USDA APHIS national identifier. You can take it to extension. You can bring it to me in Easton, but we cannot say it's positive until the USDA identifier has it in their hand. So basically, if you can get it to me or to anybody in the Maryland Department of Agriculture, that's your best bet to get this through. So it is. Yep. Yeah, you can stick it in your freezer and get it to us, or you can stick it in like a little vial of alcohol, like rubbing alcohol is fine. Those D-shaped exit holes. And those epicormic sprouts and tree canopy dieback. So historically, where have we set out these traps? You can see there's a lot of activity here because that's where the station was, and then we've kind of spread throughout the state through the years. Okay, some of the other forest pests that we do. How am I doing? Okay. All right, we'll make it. Cyrex noctilio. This is a pest of pines. It is in Pennsylvania and New York. You can see there's all green dots. So we haven't found it in Maryland, but we are really curious if we do find it, because in New York and Pennsylvania, it is attacking more northern pines, where this insect seems to like southern pines better. So it hasn't gotten into the southern pines. And so in South America, where it has gotten into southern pines, like loblolly stands, it has kind of gone rampant and killed hundreds of thousands of acres. And so we want to make sure that we find it early if we do, if it is here. So we do a survey for it every year. It's not positive. So you can see like preferred post for Cyrex, some other like there are pine species at risk, but not necessarily something that's going to see the widespread devastation like you would see in some of those other species. And you can see loblolly here. It is like southern pine beetle. Scott's going to talk about southern pine beetle too, but here it is. This is southern pine beetle. This is a green and white. This is a black turpentine beetle. So a lot of times what we see in lower parts of our pine tree stand is this black turpentine beetle. You can see it's pretty big, whereas southern pine beetle is much smaller. You can see this is what southern pine beetle looks like from egg to adult. What things do we look for? We look for popcorn tubes. These popcorn tubes are basically the tree's response to southern pine beetle. It's trying to push them out. It's trying to push them out of these. These also, like before, have S-shaped galleries. You see here's they have S-shaped, and then they have like little tunnels off of them where they're developing. And what this beetle does is it also has a fungus associated with it, and it's blue stain fungus. And a lot of times, if the beetle's not going to kill the tree, the blue stain fungus is going to help them. So this is kind of the stuff with this beetle. There is a predatory beetle that's native, and it does, you can see here, it's got a beetle in its mouth. Both the larval stage and the adult stage are predatory on southern pine beetle. When we're trapping for southern pine beetle, we often look at the predatory beetle versus the southern pine beetle relationship. So if you have a lot of predatory beetles and you have few southern pine beetles, then you can say, okay, this year we might not be seeing an outbreak because the predator population is high. Whereas if you saw the amount of southern pine beetles and they were way larger than your predatory beetles, you're going to say, okay, that's probably going to be a problem. And so how do we find this relationship? We use a trap. We love traps. Get it with pheromones. You can see this year when we were trapping, there were a lot of areas where no southern pine beetle were detected at all, and then the rest of our areas, southern pine beetle, they were in really low population. So this is good news because we've had some problems, and Scott's going to be talking about them, but a lot of our problem areas have been in lower Dorchester County, in this area here, and then we've also had some high numbers in Somerset and Worcester as well. Those, Somerset and Worcester, have not seen tree mortality, but they have had high populations, and we also are seeing some spotty populations pop up in Kent, and we've seen some up here at the Hartford-Cecil, Pennsylvania border. And so it seems as though traditionally we only had problems with southern pine beetle in the lower half of the state. But now we're seeing more problems with it in the northern part of our state, and there's lots of researchers looking to see why, because both New Jersey and New York are also seeing problems. And so I don't know, it's open for debate as to why that is happening. But mainly southern pine beetle really likes distressed trees. So if you have those areas that Jonathan was talking about earlier that have highly stocked older trees that are declining or being affected by saltwater intrusion or other pests, those are really lightning rods for southern pine beetle. The southern pine beetle loves to smell smells, and those trees set off a smell that says, hey, I'm in distress. And so that's like calling the dinner bell for a southern pine beetle. And so the southern pine beetles will come to those distressed trees. They're going to set off more pheromones to call more people to the dinner table. And so that's when we start seeing a problem. They are native, yes, that is correct. So there's some other, there's some other parasitoids, like there's little wasps and stuff. But I think they're too small. Like they're too small for birds to really. I haven't seen a lot of like woodpecker activity with these. They're just too small. They're not really interested in them. And plus, a lot of being in pine trees, that sap resin is usually what can expel these beetles enough to keep trees healthy. And that is one of the things, is that a lot of our areas do have southern pine beetle and don't have problems. And that's because the trees are healthy enough to be able to withstand them. So this is what it looks like when there is a problem. This is lower Dorchester County. You can see we've got some nice green trees and then bright red trees. And so the trees, you can see here, this is where the population is advancing. They advance from that forest, which is the first picture, over to this forest over here. And the main thing is we tell landowners to cut trees. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to stop that pheromone, that dinner bell production. And so you'll have unattacked trees, which are the green. You'll have the trees that are already dead. And then you'll have trees that are almost dead. And so what you like to do is you like to go from the dead to the almost dead, and you want to take all those out, but then you also want to take out a buffer of a live tree, and that's basically to just help keep this movement from going any further. And so you just have to be really vigilant. And a lot of, cutting down trees is the best way to help stop it. There are some limited uses for chemicals, which you can use, but there are no forestry there are no chemicals that are labeled for forestry use. So you can't go spraying a whole forest like you can for gypsy moth. But on specimen trees, ornamental uses, there are some chemical controls. The biggest thing is to maintain healthy stands and to remove any high-risk trees like lightning strike trees. It's the best way to keep southern pine beetle at bay. They typically, right, they typically do not have the ability to colonize those trees because of the high resin, and they're just so small they can't really get going, and the population can't get going. And so a lot of times those trees aren't sending out these pheromones, so they're really into the smells. It is, yes. Walnut twig beetle is another thing we survey for. This is, you think southern pine beetle is small, this is even smaller. This is Abraham Lincoln, and this is all. So these are really small. They affect walnut only. And the biggest thing is that they also have a fungus that they bring with them that causes all these cancers. So walnut twig beetle often brings Smith morbidita, which is what we like to call thousand cankers disease. So thousand cankers disease is really what's going to be killing the tree. Fungus creates all these small cankers. So there's only one area in Maryland that currently has walnut twig beetle. It is Fair Hill in Cecil County. We've been, like you can see here, we only caught 2 beetles there this year. So the population is still really low. Trees are still looking healthy, but we do have the beetle there, so there is a small quarantine area. You can see this area here is quarantining for walnut twig beetle and for thousand cankers disease. So basically, you can't move any walnut wood out of that area. Yes. Yeah. I think mainly with walnut twig beetle, it's a human problem. So people might be bringing it with firewood, because the complex that this beetle was found at does have a lot of like campers and tourists and stuff like that. So we think that that's how that one got there. But it is moving around. Yes. So quickly, I talked about hemlocks. We do a lot of hemlock treatments throughout the state. These are all the stands from 2004 to 2017 that we've treated. So this is what hemlock woolly adelgid looks like. Basically, if you have a hemlock in the state, it probably has hemlock woolly adelgid on it. And so it's kind of a slow death for these hemlock trees, but we do have chemical treatments and biologicals that we are releasing for this. So I just wanted to mention it. There's not a lot of hemlocks on the shore, but there are some nice stands in Karen Line. So we also survey for exotic Asian defoliators. So this is basically a fancy term for all the gypsy moth of the world. And so we survey for 7 different moths. They're from Russia through China through Japan, because we're seeing a lot of increased traffic into the Port of Baltimore. So increased traffic comes increased chance of these moths flying off of the ship and into our forests. And so these are all the areas that we surveyed for exotic Asian defoliators this year, and we didn't find anything. So that's great. The other thing is oak wilt. Oak wilt is not on the shore, but I did want to bring it up because there is a new positive in Carroll County. It was a homeowner that told us about it. So basically, you'll see what happens is fungal mats will develop behind the tree. You'll see those like in the emerald ash borer photo, I showed you those tree cracks in the bark. So you'll see a crack in the bark, and then underneath will be this fungal mat. And so this is kind of what it looks like on a leaf. So there's that. So that spreads. It doesn't spread very fast. Oak wilt has been in Garrett and Allegheny counties for years, but basically it spreads through your nididulid beetles, your sap beetles. They kind of get in there and move around, and then they get the fungus attached on them, and then they move around to another tree, and the fungus just happens to be hitchhiking, and it gets to another tree. But the other way it spreads is through root grafts. So that's why it can be problematic in the area that does get infested, because not only do you have the nididulid beetles moving around the fungus, but you also have it spreading through the roots. And then the final thing is spotted lanternfly. So we do not have spotted lanternfly yet in Maryland, but it is coming. I can guarantee it. So this is a really bad, brown marmorated stink bug, but 10 times worse. So not necessarily for your homes, but certainly for your outside environment. This is what it looks like. This is what the adult looks like, and then this is what a juvenile looks like. So the quarantine for spotted lanternfly comes down to the Maryland border. So there's also records in Virginia, Delaware, and New Jersey now. So we're surrounded. So we need to keep an eye out for this pest. It will be a problem for grapes, hops. It has a host list, a huge, huge host list. But mainly the problem is not only does it pierce and suck plant juices, but it also then expels it as honeydew, which then can create a lot of sooty mold problems. So it's not necessarily that these are going to take out, they're certainly going to take out branches of trees. They might do some pruning almost of those outside trees, but then you're going to have a lot of sooty mold associated with it. So anyway, please keep a lookout for this. We have this email address, don'tbug.md@maryland.gov, and so you can report any sort of findings you might see. But be aware, if you're traveling to Lancaster, a lot of those areas up there have this bug, and they love to hitchhike. And that's what happened, is they hitchhiked on some on some stones that came from China. So you just want to be aware that they're great hitchhikers. They will love to get into your car if you're in those areas. So just be aware that this is there, they're fighting it, but it seems to keep spreading. So, yep. And so keep a watch out for invasives. This is my email address, heather.disque@maryland.gov. This is my phone number to my office. Please, if you have any problems or questions, please don't hesitate to call. I will be here on break, so that's when I'll take the rest of your questions, because we need to keep going. But thank you.